Hello, this is John Speelman with the latest edition of my twice monthly column for Chessbase, number 157 in fact. So I'm going to have to put column 157 there, but I will do that in a minute. And I've called it The Joy of Endgames. And basically 3 weeks ago in fact, because it was middle of October, wasn't it? I looked at a couple of endings by junior players from the top of the junior list. And this time I was sort of thinking of carrying on with more kids, but actually, well, one of them is allegedly, he is under 20 or under 21, Alireza Firouzja. But since he may well have qualified for the candidates by the time that you read this, I don't know yet. He's at the moment, as I speak, he's playing David Howell, and I don't know what's going on there. It's probably, my engine says about equal, but there we are. That's happening as I record this. But I said it doesn't count really as a triumph for Sprogdom. It's possibly Sprogdom, possibly Sproghood, I don't know. Up to you, I think. And it's from the FIDE Grand Swiss in Riga, which finished on November the 7th, when this was published, Sunday, November the 7th. And it's a rook ending against Evgeny Nair, and I was enjoying this rook ending, a very interesting ending. And then there was a game between Maxim Vachier-Lagrave, MVL, and Alexei Shirov, where he agreed to draw in a pawn ending. And I'm just going to put in column 157 while I'm here. And I'm just also going to check, so we'll have a little bit of feedback for a second that we're recording. And we are. Good. So he agreed to draw. I was looking with a pupil who said to me, "Are you sure it's drawn? Because White's King's better." And I said, "Oh yeah, blah blah, a la the COP conference." But in fact, I was wrong. It's a very interesting ending indeed. So hats off to him for realising that it was worth looking at. Actually, the annotation in Chessbase said something like White has chances after King b4, but stopped there, and I've ended up with several pages of analysis. So I've made the point that all chess analysis, and that of endgames in particular, has been transformed in recent years by computer technology. Excuse me. Not only can you turn an engine on, I'm turning an engine on actually here, aren't I? Oh God, I try not to do. It's just when I see it, it's so annoying. Turn an engine on to get an instant assessment, which is generally very correct. Though of course there are, when you're doing endings, there are fortresses sometimes where the engines get it completely wrong. But you can also, if you get to 7 pieces, you can turn on God, or you can get the ear of God, because you have table bases which have perfect knowledge. And so that's transformed how you analyse them. Obviously not what you do at the board, but if I'm analysing an ending, I can try to work out exactly what's going on, and in principle I should be able to do so. So this is, we'll start with the Alireza against Evgeny Nair, and they're both in here in column 157 itself. And okay, Alireza against Nair, indeed, yes. And okay, they played out. I'm not interested in the opening at all. He managed to get some advantage eventually. I haven't even looked at the game really. I've thought about the ending in quite a lot of detail. I like Bishop b1. That reminds me of Aronian Tal, if people know that game. There's a famous game where Tal put a bishop on b1, but in that case White had a rook on a1, and it was an attacking move because it cut the rook off from defending the back rank in the strongest possible terms. So they got to this ending, and Okay, they played some more moves, and he's managed to get to rook against rook and pawn, rook and 3, and an a pawn against rook and 3. So this is where I started looking, actually. I mean, I was probably doing other stuff. I didn't really look at the game up to here. And I thought, what's he going to do? And in fact, he went f4, which is quite clever, and sacrificed the g-pawn, which you must take to get going. Possibly you could play rook d2, by the way, to cut the king, because a7 isn't necessarily a great thing. It lets the black king out. But anyway, he went rook a2, king here, f5. And so they got to the critical position. And of course, it's really difficult in a game. First question, can you play rook b2 check? Well, the guy thought not, but in fact, if you play rook b2 check, rook takes b2, you've got precisely 7 pieces on the end on the board, and you ask the great oracle itself, and it says ping draw, and that would have been one of the ways to draw. And there's a second way. He played pawn equals queen, which was pretty desperate and lost by... Did it lose by 1 or 2 tempi? So if pawn equals queen was played, so there are 2 moves. Rook b2 check, rook takes rook, pawn equals queen. Check, king g6. But he can't go pawn equals queen because of queen to f8 check to a3 check. And by the way, you couldn't go pawn equals queen here because the rook is too loose. So you had to do this. And the best you can do is to queen, and then it goes ping, king to there, king b7 doesn't help, check, rook to there, because otherwise you've got nothing better you can do. Remember, of course, you can't put the king on c6 because of queen e4 check, so you can't try to escape that way. And it tells me it's a draw. And I thought his queen d6 a move because I'd forgotten about queen c6 actually when I was looking at it. The thing is that it does infantilize you when you're using a table base, because you know the truth is going to be told to you, and we will believe that after queen b4 check that it's a draw. It's a perfectly reasonable statement, and we could actually prove it, but it would take a certain amount of faffing around, wouldn't it? Many checks, but we'll believe the great table base itself. So we go back to here. The other way you can play, the best move actually, is king f6, pawn equals queen. No advantage in going rook f1, king g... Well, first you can go rook b2 check. Then also, even if you couldn't, king g5, rook takes pawn, rook takes rook, pawn equals queen, there'd be rook f8 check and black would win. So I must take this, king to here. Must go and take this pawn. And the rook can't get to stop the pawn. Best you can do is rook to there, or rook f7, doesn't matter, and cut the king. And it always slows him down, making the king in front. You're not going to do better than that. And it turns out, not a difficult piece of calculation, that you're a tempo away from winning here. Obviously, if you could go king to f3 to g3, you'd win. So that's what he should have done. But if we go back to the critical position... sorry, my mouse is fighting me. Wicked mouse. You want f8 equals queen takes, check here, rook to there, rook to here. Now you're going to go rook to c8 takes to b8 to get the king out. We'll get on rook c7 actually, h5. Check. I thought he might go rook b5, which sort of seems to cut the king. So I thought, I didn't realise how easily rook b6 won, but it goes like this. Rook to there is completely hopeless. Rook f3 here. And the white king is far too close here. You can see it's only 4 squares from f1. Obviously this is easily a win. But he actually went rook b6 check, which is more forcing. King b7 here, here. And now I resign, because what happens is that you run along this rank, and black doesn't even get it to give up his rook for the queen. Because you could also have gone And the other thing you could have done is round about here play king e6, which is going to win certainly. Rook back pawn equals queen, and presumably you're going to win by several tempi then as well because your king's so close. So a nice ending by Alireza. Now the next one is this one where Maxime Vachier-Lagrave drew with Shirov. Again, I haven't bothered with the game up to the ending at all. Some sort of complicated Lopez. By the way, after a5 you can't play knight a5 because rook takes knight, bishop takes rook, pawn takes pawn is known to be very good for white. This is a theoretical position. I don't know if this is still theory. It must be close to it, I imagine. Let's just find out. See if, just put on reference. No games found. Okay, so this was MVL's new idea, perhaps, or perhaps he just didn't know what he was doing, really. He didn't get anything much. I mean, you could maybe play c5 or c6 and try to win, actually. But okay, I mean, we're not looking at this anyway. We're just... So they got to this pawn ending eventually. And g4 is... Okay, g4 is naturally... Here I think that MVL had given up, had almost given up, perhaps. I think probably almost would be fairer. So I'm going to change that as well. Thinking about... Here I think that MVL had almost given up. Sorry, not at most, but almost. Convinced that it was going to be a draw. And he didn't try terribly hard. He went g4, king to there, h4, king 8, king b7, and now he went h5. h5 was that actually happened. Now I've actually promoted the analysis so that my main line is in bold, because otherwise it's going to be very, very hard to follow it. What actually happened though was h5 and they agreed to draw. And the reason for that is that black can now allow white to play king g6, king f8, and there's no pawn break, so there's nothing white can do at all. Black just needs to go king d4, king c6, king e4, king d6, king f5, king e7, king g6, king f8, and nothing happens at all. So after h5 they agreed to draw. Well, my people said, well, can you play? And you can indeed. King b4, I think king c6 draws as well, but I'm going to show you the main line. Here, now, king c6, I think if you play a5, then you're going to lose, because is that true? I assume it's true. And a5 and king c6 and king b6. We'll play g3, and then we'll start. I'm not sure actually, even of that. Let me ask an engine because I'm now confused. Is a5 possible? It says a5 loses to h5 kings. Of course it does. Yes, sorry. If a5, h5, king c6 here, and now because you've played a5 you don't control that square, and therefore you have to go king b6, and now there's a race, and the race is winning for white. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. 1 2 3. I think you go 4 to go g5. 5 6 7 8 9. But you queen with check. It's a race that you have in other lines as well. I'll do it for you anyway here because it's there. Here, 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 here. Got to take this way. Take, fifth, take. And actually black queen's first, but unfortunately Right, so I suppose I could take a poll. Do I have a bishop or a... Oh, I'll have a bishop, shall I? Okay, and that wins. And so that is why you can't play a5. So king c6, king here, g3. If you go king d4, king b5, then apparently in that position, with the pawn on h4, you get to queen and f pawn, queen and g pawn against queen. It goes king d4, king b5, king d4, king b5, and queen to their check, and it's a draw. I think you can try to put your king in d6, so if queen d3 check, there's queen d5, but the table base confirms it's a draw, and we're not surprised, are we? It would be utterly extraordinary if it weren't in this position, really. So there are so many checks, and the pawn's pretty loose. So you can't do that. So g3, I don't know if this is, I don't suppose it's Zugzwang here. And now king d6, king d4, and actually in this position you should play g6 here, and apparently this is a draw. b4, if king e4, king e6, b4, king d7, king d5, king d7, black gets the opposition, or king f5, king f7. So you go b4 first. Now black has to give way, but he can go this way and he's in time. And I carried this on. Because it's got 8 pieces, I wasn't able to be absolutely 1,000,000% certain. Sorry, 100, I know. I know footballers say I'm giving 105%, and it makes me squeal as a mathematician or a former mathematician. But you know what I mean. Anyway, this turns out to be fairly clearly drawn. For instance, something like this. When we get to here, these are 6 pawns, and it tells me it's a draw. Doesn't matter what that says, because the table base says draw. So king to here is a mistake, actually. Now I think you're losing. So actually king c6 is a mistake, and this is rather fascinating. So h5 is hopeless because of king h7, and you end up with black ends up with the wrong tempi. So if h5, king to here, here, b4, and the game ends. So you have to take. And when I was doing this the first time, we've actually got to the glorious 7-piece ending. And actually here, I wasn't looking at this moment, so I rather automatically played the glorious move king to hg5, which draws. But as this engine points out, and as the table base points out, g4 is winning. So I'll show you both variations. So the first one is king g5, king f7 or king both draw, king to here. If king g6, king e6, take, there's nothing really better. Black is just in time. And if king f5, king d6, there's a race. But black has got king and rook's pawn on the 7th, so he draws. So those were both draws, but in fact, okay. White to move can only draw. Wait a minute, let's go back. So we're going to, sorry, I'm getting right to the top. So now this is if king g5, king here, king d6 is the only move to draw. Again, if... And yeah, and then we go into a race. So we've just done that. So let's go right back, miles and miles, to here. That's not the one I want. I want this one, where you should play g4. And now there are two moves. If king g8, 8b4 here and here. Now the tempi are different, and black's problem is after king here. By the way, I should say that if king g8, king to here, king to here, king to here, king to here, pawn, pawn, king, pawn, pawn, b5 and mates. So I should say that, but king e7, king g6, king f8, king h7, and the tempi are wrong for black. So after king f7, king f5, black is in deep trouble. He can't go king e7, and if he goes, well, he's basically just lost, and white wins. So the best you can try is a5 here, and now b3, actually you can go king to e7 to b4 to c5 to b4 takes pawn, pawn to the 7th, white queens to a check, but black plays king b2. But now what you do is white, you play king f5, which is a beautiful move, and the table base told me. I didn't realise this, I should have done, I suppose. And the point about this is that now black has no way through to the g-pawn. So you just sit there. You can go there, you go there. He must go back, and now you race. And actually, okay, there's still with the pawn on g5, you have to be a tiny wee bit careful as white. But for instance, you go here, here, queen to there, g4, queen to there. Now if g3, you go queen h4 check, king to there, you go check, here, or king h3, queen to there, king to there, queen to there, check. Might as well do that. If you go to the f file, I can go queen f4 check and just take on g4, and then I get the normal position. And actually the best way to do this now is queen e3, pawn equals queen, queen e2 mate, but I first saw queen f4 check. And then you win the normal way. So, a pretty incredible piece. Well, I don't know if my analysis is sound, of course, but it's pretty amazing what you can achieve with the use of a bit of brain power, an engine, and then a table base. So I think that it was drawn after king b4 if black plays g6 at the right moment. I think you get a worse but drawable queen ending. I think that after king d4, king c6, white is winning, however. And that's not that difficult to prove, really. Once you see the glorious move g4, it's just that, you know, because you're analysing, you actually play some moves yourself, or at least I do. I don't kowtow totally to the engine. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and I will be back on the 21st, I suppose, because that will be in a fortnight, and with something else. Please tell me if you can think of anything interesting to do. I can carry on with more Uber Sprogs. I can do something else. Right, I hope you've enjoyed this, and I'm going to sign off now. Right.